entrepreneurial ecosystem that works at the intersection of technology and society. It is an initiative of IIIB and the IIIB Innovation Center. I would now like to ask Mr. Karthik Kittu, the Chief Innovation Officer of IIIB Bangalore, to introduce our speaker for today. Over to you, Mr. Karthik.
Thanks, Sumuk, and thank you, Shyam, for joining in and really, helping us out. To give a small introduction before I hand it over to Shyam, Shyam is a co-founder of Bharat Innovation Fund and Infuse Ventures. Bharat Innovation Fund focuses on investing in and catalyzing growth of Indian-based IP-led startups in the healthcare, clean tech, agri-tech, fintech, and digital tech sectors. Feel free to connect if you are an entrepreneur in these spaces. And Infuse Ventures is the first clean tech focused early stage venture capital fund in India, actively working with entrepreneurs, focusing on building scalable businesses in the area of energy, water, waste management, sustainable agriculture, and transportation. A little more background on Mr. Shyam. He is a fellow of the leadership program, Chevening Fellow of the Rolls-Royce Science and Technology Innovation Leadership Program at the University of Oxford. Also, with degrees in Masters in Science from University of Missouri in Rolla and University of California, and many more. Thank you, Shyam, so much for sparing the time and helping our young entrepreneurs get a deep dive on their pitch deck. And I would now hand it over to you. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Karthik. I'm assuming the audience is mostly student entrepreneurs or just students at IIIB?
No, students at IIIB and a few colleges from outside also. Quite a few colleges.
Okay, got it. So, hi all. Good to connect. I mean, I haven't done any detailed preparation for this, but at least I can give you a sense of what is expected from a pitch deck that you would prepare if you are trying to pitch across an idea, for a potential investor. Honestly, it doesn't matter whether it is at a very, very early angel round or a seed stage or whatever stage it is of the company. I mean, this is broadly how you would go about pitching an idea. Now, of course, I'd like to make this quite interactive. So these are just some very basic slides. And these slides are very, very basic. I mean, it's stuff that you will get anyway if you look up online. But after that, if you have any questions, I mean, I would love to make this interactive and see if, can give you any, if I can give you any inputs that would be useful in what you're trying to do. But let's just get into it and see, what you would typically do with a pitch deck. So, I mean, it's basically just a short overview of your idea, that you're using. I mean, whatever you want to convey to your investors. So one key thing is just try and limit it to maybe 10 slides or 10 or 12 slides. Your introductory pitch deck for any, for a business, honestly shouldn't be more than that. You can have a much more detailed pitch deck that you can prepare, which you can use in subsequent discussions with potential investors if they are interested. Hard and fast rule for you to how to explain your solution here. But what I'm trying to say is be clear about this is not the area where you dig deep into what is the core technology, architecture of your solution. That's not what you're trying to say here. You're just trying to give an understanding of how have you gone about creating a solution for this problem? What is your approach to the solution? And of course, you will have different elements of it, different technology components you may be developing for the solution, which you may have developed to a certain extent and a lot more may further need to be developed. That's okay. But you're just stating that this is the blocks with which you are trying to solve this problem. This is how your solution is evolving. And you don't need to delve into a lot of technical details, not at the introductory pitch deck level. Then, this slide flow is not necessarily the slide flow that we would use or anything. This was just a random template that I found online. This actually came out of Ratan Tata's office. I mean, I think he was putting out some pitch deck, templates out there. I mean, you can use this template. It's fine as a template goes. So once you give out your solution, maybe the next step could very well be this, where you're talking about why would your solution be unique? As in, what is it about your approach that would make you potentially more successful than anyone else in this ecosystem who is trying to develop a solution for such a problem? So without delving into too many details, try and highlight your unique proposition, whatever it is that you're trying to do. Following which, this is not necessarily competition barrier to entry. What you see here is you don't necessarily have to keep this at this stage. You could possibly, after solution and USP, go straight towards the market, which I think you would probably see somewhere down the road here. Yeah, you could actually talk about what is that target market, try and see if you can size that market. Now, this is actually an interesting area, because you're not talking about saying, okay, you're making a product for majority of India or majority of the world. That's not how you do a market sizing. You need to get quite granular. I mean, if you're trying to develop something in the education space, maybe you decide whether is it something for K-12 or post K-12. And then if it is within the K-12 market, what is the sub-segment? Are you targeting urban rural? Then inside urban rural, what sub-segment are you targeting? Try and get as granular as you can in your target market. Don't leave it at a very high level. And that's a very important factor, because that will give a sense to the investor whether you understand what your market is. I mean, if you, the more granular you are about your target market, the better better your odds are of convincing an investor that you know what you're talking about, because it shows that you've done the work to get granular on your actual target market. Of course, you may have a much larger market you may want to target over time, but at least your initial market, who are you targeting in your first year of operations? There you need to be pretty granular. I mean, beyond that, you can, of course, extrapolate and give an explanation of what your target market is. Typically, yeah. So once you get there, once you've laid out your high level solution, your USP, your target market, then you can get one step more detailed. You can get to how does your product and service actually work? There you can probably give a little bit more explanation, a little bit more granular about how that product or service is actually adding value. What is the little bit more of the operational or process flow of how your product would actually work. So it's a pretty obvious train of thought, post which actually you can in fact do your competition typically at this point. Once you've done your solution, you've explained what is your USP, you've gone ahead and explained how your product and solution starts to work, and then, or how at least you've planned on it working, and then you can say broadly these are the areas that you foresee competition in, or you already have existing competition in. So you explain what the competitive layout is. It's important for even investors that you're pitching to know that you understand who the competition is. So ensure that you don't hide the most obvious players. If they are competition, and if you think any investor coming into a conversation with you, if they've had some time beforehand, would have done a very basic competitive analysis on your sector and would broadly be aware of companies operating in there. So just by you not putting your companies in here doesn't mean they don't get it. They know what are the companies broadly operating in this space. So if there are publicly announced investments in companies which are broadly operating in the sector that you are getting into, ensure that you put in at least a couple of sentences each on how what you are doing is complementary or not, or is in competition with the main players in the area. It gives confidence to the investor that you know what you're talking about, you know your competitive landscape. It's not a negative. It's, if there is any money to be made in this world, there will always be competition for whatever market there is. So if there is no competition, then that's a problem. There is something that it makes no sense that no one has ever thought of it. I mean, you can always stumble upon such an idea, but the odds are much lower that it would be an area that no one has ever been in. So odds are that there will be competition in the sector that you're getting into in some way, shape or form. So it's good for you to at least ensure that you put the details, at least whatever limited details you have of the competition that you're getting into. And then the barrier to entry question will always get debated till kingdom come. I mean, you can address it or not. I mean, there is only a limited barrier to entry for most things. I mean, most things most people will be able to get over, unless you are doing some very detailed biotech work or something, and you have a lot of IP that creates an extremely high barrier to entry. Broadly, if it is internet, IT, AI, ML, etc., there will be a limited barrier to entry, but still you can, you can talk about what you think is the barrier to entry that you are able to build. It's again, it's all negotiable whether the investor who's hearing your pitch will take your point of view regarding your barrier to entry, but it's still worthwhile for you to put it out there as to why you think you've been able to build a barrier to entry. So that's important there. Then, I mean, if you are at a stage, if you're not at a seed stage and you've got your prototype, or if you have early revenue, do put it out there what you've already made and what your model for generating that revenue has been. Even if you don't have that, at least what your thought process is today to monetize. What is your monetization pathway? Even if your model calls for you to spend money in your early years developing a subscription base or developing a data set or whatever it is, and you don't see revenues in the first plan, you're not planning to see revenues in the first few years, that's okay. I mean, it's not to say that there's anything wrong with your model. Just lay it out there that this is the stage at which you think you would start to generate revenue, and these are the mechanisms through which you think monetization is possible. Now, again, it's all up to debate on whether it'll work out the way you want it to or not, but that's okay. What you are doing is you are laying it out there that this is how you think your revenue generation will happen. If you are able to do some projections, do it. But I mean, most investors will just glance at it only just to get a sense of what at least as an entrepreneur you are thinking is the scale of your business. I mean, no one will take your projections to heart. I mean, it's not a number that anyone's going to stick to. But it will at least just give a sense to the investor that the entrepreneur is thinking about, potentially $100 million business down the road, potentially a $50 million business, potentially $1 billion business. At least what kind of thought process do you have? I mean, and is it even remotely realistic that it's possible for you to hit that? I mean, it just gives an indication to the investor as to how you're thinking about the kind of business that you're building, whether you are being realistic or not, whether you understand your business area or not. Because if you're making wild projections, then and there is just no way to substantiate it, then that may not play to your strength, because people get it. Investors understand a lot of sectors and understand what's possible in some of those sectors. So you've got to stay realistic within the realm of what you're trying to achieve and make projections if you can. It gives an indication about your thought process. Then cash burn, etc., depends upon the kind of business you're getting into. I mean, some businesses tend to have high cash burn, some don't. Nothing to say that one is better than the other. If you are capable, you are the kind of entrepreneur who can raise capital, who has got the background and the pedigree and the right idea, you can raise capital, going forward on your businesses, even if it is cash burning in the initial years. That's not a reason for it. For a business plan to get turned down. What is important is that the business plan should make sense. Then so that could be the flow. I mean, in this particular template, I think the market was put behind. Then down the road, you can talk about the milestones you have reached so far, where you are, prototypes, patents, pilots, etc. What are you planning in milestones? This product or solution roadmap or milestones is also a very important couple of slides if you work on it, because it again gives an indication to investors as to how your thought process is evolving in terms of the product and service. You may be at very early days, but if you've got a vision, because the investors who are looking to invest in you, especially if you're going for institutional money, they are looking at a long haul. I mean, whether the particular investor you're looking at may be with you for 3 or 4 years, the point is when they look at the business, they are looking at it from a 10-year cycle at least, because you will have other investors who will have to come in at the back of the first set of investors you're speaking to. Now, why would they take on to your story? They will only latch on to your story if your story has legs to survive the long haul. I mean, you need to be able to give any investor coming in at any stage almost a 5x multiple minimum in terms of their expected return typically. So the story has to be strong enough that there is a story for 10-15 years. No matter at what stage you are pitching, the story has to be clear for the investors you're pitching to, and the investors to whom the investor you're pitching to may be able to exit in 5-year timeline, in a 5 or 7-year timeline. So your vision needs to be for the long run, and your product and solution roadmap also needs to reflect that vision. That's really critical if you want to be able to crack a long-term investor early on. Then if you've raised funding, you talk about that, what you managed to raise. It can be a seed round, it can be friends and family, it can be early angel investors, whatever commitments you have. If you're getting angel investor commitments, ensure that try and get it from credible people. Credible as in if they have some credibility in the sector in which you are creating a new business, it's always better, because you are showing that you've been able to convince somebody who's within that particular industry of your vision and of what you're trying to do, and you've got their money to back your story. And that's actually very that's a very credible signal for especially venture capital funds, etc., down the road. If as an early stage startup you've been able to get angel funding from credible industrial practitioners in the area in which you're building a company or you're planning to build a company, then you get to the team. You can take it early on or later, it's up to you. You can do it either way. Talk about the team, the founding members, your credentials, what you've done so far, and as to why you've created the team you've created. I mean, ideally, it's good to have, if you have a very core technical team, it's also good if you're able to ensure that you have a person who's done business before or done sales before. So all that is also helpful to have. So you can talk about the background. Again, there is no formula for the right team members or anything. I mean, nothing to say that two technical people cannot build a amazing company. You can, but it's good if you have a mix of skills that shows why or how you're able to unite the different skill sets that you have to be able to deliver on the goal that you're setting out to deliver. It's just easier, better to be able to explain that you have the different skill sets already amongst the founding members, if that is possible. Typically, investors prefer at least 2 founders rather than single founders. I mean, broadly, couple of founders is, I don't know if it is right, wrong, good or bad, even over the years. 2 founders have generally been better, I can say, a little better than, say, if it is a single founder, because it's a very long journey building a company. It's good if you have someone who can just be there. You need a shoulder to cry on. You need somebody to support you when you are going through a tough time. That partner in business is quite important. It's a very lonely journey otherwise if you're trying to do it on your own as a single founder. So ideally, it's good to have at least 2 founders. So you talk about the team, and then try and put data out there. Data speaks better than anything else. I mean, if you've got any data to validate any hypothesis, put it out there, and you just explain it through your data. Stick to 10 to 15 slides. It's more than sufficient for your introductory deck. Simple, clean decks are always preferred by investors, and it's not everything. It's just a starting point, and there are tons and tons of resources out there for making a better deck. There is no shortage of resources for that. And wishing you guys all the best in terms of what you would like to go ahead and do in terms of an entrepreneurial journey. Don't get disheartened if people don't bite, the first investors don't bite. I mean, it doesn't matter which idea you talk about. Most of them have gone through hundreds of pitches before anyone has actually given them a first check. And this holds true for all of the players. It doesn't matter whether you talk from Facebook, Google, or Flipkart, or it doesn't matter who. All of them have been through hundreds of pitches before an initial investor would have come in. So it's a long journey if you're planning to build a business. So you need to have the stomach for a lot of ups and downs if you're going to go through this. And that's about it from my side. Done, Karthik.
Thanks, Shyam, for that lovely journey. So to start with, we have a few questions.
Sure.
So one of them was, what as an investor on the other side, what are you looking for? So a lot of people hear that a good team versus a bad idea and a bad team versus a good idea. What is the choice that you might take? I know you look for a good team and an amazing idea, but what is your thought?
See,
this is the more important factor: the idea or the team.
See, it's only when all come together you have a good business. End of the day, I mean, all of this has to come together eventually. But a good team is always a good starting point. I mean, hopefully, even if your initial idea is not that great, you'll figure something out as you go along. I mean, so your odds of success is better if you have a good quality team, because a good idea with a bad team anyway won't work.
So the second question is something like, see, traditionally, I mean, in a lot of, I know, we are a technology university, but if you're a generalized university, what's your thought? See, usually projects are given to people with 2 people from the technology background, like you said. I mean, but nowadays people are encouraging 1 from technology, 1 from management, 1 from the commerce background. So people can actually put that, we are trying to do that with a lot of alliances. What are your thoughts on these kind of mix and match with students for a lot of our universities who are listening in?
No, fair enough. I mean, the thing is, it has to be a natural process of evolution, Karthik. I mean, it can't be forced. Just because you put 1 guy from commerce and 1 guy from business school and 1 guy from technology doesn't mean you'll get a good company. It is just a khichdi, right? I mean, eventually, it has to be because those 3 people really believe in something together and they believe they can do it, and then their skills are complementary. It'll come together. But you can't force such a mix. If a team is coming together because they think they can raise funding because of that combination of skill sets, even if they luck out in 1 round of funding, that story won't hold. It will fall apart somewhere along the way. So it has to be because they all believe in the story really well and they can actually deliver on that. So that's the only way it will work in the end, Karthik. I mean, so that is where I was saying, I mean, all of this is theoretically ideal to have the right combination of skill sets and the right pedigree and all of this stuff, the IIT, IIM or HBS, Stanford or whatever, MIT. But doesn't mean any of that is necessary. I mean, we saw that in Infuse Ventures, we saw that in Bharat. I mean, I look at a successful portfolio of CEOs.
Yes.
It's not that they all went to pedigreed schools. It's not that they had a lot of experience. It's not any of that. They just had more hunger and drive and they were making the right product at the right time. Yeah. I can't emphasize the importance of the right timing for a business. Timing is more important than anything else. I mean, you could come up with the best idea ever, but if you're 2 years ahead of the market, then the market is not ready for it. You won't get the funding, market won't take off. So I have a feeling more than any of the other things, it's your timing that is most important in this than anything else.
And absolutely, I think you definitely were bang on. I mean, I also experienced that in my past when I was an entrepreneur before, and I totally would second this, that it's the right product at the right time.
Right. That is really the secret to success, man. It is right product at the right time.
So I have one more question from Sanjit, who says, how does one's personality help to get funding? Or does it?
It does. It definitely does. I mean, definitely. I mean, I'm not denying that at all. If you have the kind of personality that gives some form of confidence to an investor, that they feel that this person is grounded. It's not that he needs to be a big extrovert or speak a lot or use some fancy words or go to HBS or Stanford. That is not the point. The point is the guy has to give out a certain vibe of confidence that and a certain maturity that he can handle the drama that will come, in this journey. There is so much drama that is there in the process of building a business, and so much pain, so you have to have a certain gravitas about you. There's certain, if you are able to convey that you are in it for the long haul, and you have the right intentions to build a real business no matter what, and you're not just in there to make a buck because there is a funding wave in something. If you're not thinking like that, and if you are able to convey your seriousness and your sincerity and your humility, and your ability to work hard, if you're able to convey these things, I think investors like that. They are the kind of people that investors want to support for the long haul, because every investor knows that most 90% of the stuff that you put in that pitch deck will never happen. 90% will not happen. But it's okay. If you still have the right DNA to build a business, you'll still build it. Whether it is in the same area that you pitched or not, whether the entire thing pivots 50 times over, you'll still build it if you're doing it with the right intentions. If you're trying to make a quick buck in the venture market, I think a lot of investors can see through that nowadays.
I know. So I think people like you are very seasoned, who would have gone through thousands
a lot of this, yes. 15 years of doing this now.
Definitely, guys, sincerity, humility, and hard work, I would second that.
Nothing is more important, man. If you can prove that, if you can show you're sincere, you're humble, and you're working hard, and that you're willing to take on, this journey is long and hard. I mean, if you're able to convince people that you have the gravitas to pull it off, then I think you'll be able to raise money.
I think I used to tell also people that it's not like a 100-meter sprint, it's like a 42-kilometer marathon, right?
Oh God, it's a long haul, yes.
So that's my favorite line to some of the students. It should be like a marathon. You should last.
It's not a sprint at all. Not at all a sprint.
The next question says, sir, we have designed an idea, but we are unable to figure out the economical sections like the target market and revenues. So what's your advice to figure something like that out?
There is no easy answer. I agree. It's not easy. It depends on what area you are in, But in my mind, I mean, let me put it, you have to have some concept of how you will monetize something. I mean, it may not have played out. It may not be clear today what your end monetization would be, but at least a pathway. You should have thought through, if you're doing a business, eventually that business has to figure out a way to stand on its own 2 feet. So there is some pathway. So you can look at existing business models out there and see if any of them is applicable for your business. And see, but I mean, maybe it is not. Maybe you need to evolve and find out an entire new business model. But then it becomes harder to convince an investor that it's monetizable or fundable. Because if you have a business model that will eventually become a SaaS model which somebody will pay for, then that's a business model investor understands how a SaaS business works, or if it's a direct B2C business, investors understand that. So if you have a business where the monetization is just not visible at all, then the journey to convince an investor becomes that much harder. So you have to go through that journey of being able to convince an investor there is a business model there. So even if you can't monetize today, you need to put in the effort to show how can monetization happen, and you build your story accordingly. Whether investors buy the story or not is up to them. But you better look at the existing business models and see if anything is potentially applicable to what you're trying to do.
So one more question in these, COVID times, a lot of students a lot of people have maybe got job offers and are dreaming to get to a few places. And now, seemingly the world seems to stop and entrepreneurship seems to be also a choice. So versus some students who have been in their pre-final year and their final year and already steamed up. So what is your thought process to these kind of students? And do you think the market is open?
And don't get into doing a startup because you can't get a job. That's not why you do this. I mean, it's a different kind of DNA to build a business, compared to working at a job. So don't do it for that reason. I mean, if you're not getting a job right now because the market is bad, do more upskilling courses and stuff. I mean, whatever you can do online. If you guys are all in technology, I mean, you just upskill yourself more in AI, ML, and different areas like that. I mean, just so don't be an entrepreneur because you can't get a job. Just if you want to get a job, ensure that you upskill and reskill yourself in the areas where more openings are there. But entrepreneurship has to be driven because you really want to do something, build something in a space where you see potential, where not too many people are seeing potential, and you think there is a way to monetize, and for some reason no one's doing it, and you think you have the ability to fight a long battle and become a winner there. Only in that instance should you consider becoming a startup. Do not make that your choice because of a lack of ability to get a job because of the COVID times. I mean, this is just a scenario. It will change. Whether this time will change in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, who knows? But within a year's time, hopefully there will be some form of normalcy. There will be a vaccine that will come out someday. Then, the vaccine will spread out to the whole world. So it's not that the COVID times are here forever. There is an end point to this. You can use this intermediate time to upskill yourself into areas that you would like to, work in. Use this time to further develop your skill sets.
I mean, that's so true. I mean, I know a lot of people thought what to do at COVID times, but a lot of us also kept, like you said, busy. I mean, I remember doing a couple of products, finishing a lot of things, and also being part of the Chief Minister's War Room and still having time.
Yeah.
So, definitely, I would back that, friends. And the next question says, recently some competitions of business plan, the first round selection is on pitch deck. But as you said, we should not include much text in the pitch. We don't get the chance to demonstrate in the first round. So how do I deal with such things?
I agree. You're right. I mean, unfortunately, it's what it is, right? The problem with the place, especially a place like India, is that if you open up something, you have thousands of applications that come in. So then how do you select someone, right? It's more elimination than selection in India. So this is where you fall into this trap. But even with all that said, try and see if you can bring clarity of thought into your presentation with limited text as much as possible. Your odds of, because anybody knows, even who's evaluating a pitch deck, depends upon the kind of people who are evaluating a pitch deck. But if there are people who have been doing this for some time, they will know that in that initial pitch deck, all you can do is put your idea out there clearly, not put out your entire business plan. That business plan is a much larger document that comes in the back end of this. It's not what comes in your pitch deck. A pitch deck is got to clearly state the problem, the solution, your USP, and what have you achieved so far, and where do you think this business can go. That's all it should contain. It's really that 5 to 10 slides with simple, clear messaging is really all, in my mind, an introductory pitch deck should have. And if the pitch deck selectors are not able to see past that, it's unfortunately their problem. You can't expect to put all your story of your business into a pitch deck. It just doesn't work like that. It's not the right way. But yeah.
I think, I think that's a great answer, because a lot of people, I think, get disheartened. You should keep trying. Right? I think there are a lot of things. Maybe it all depends on the kind of forum you're pitching it for.
Kind of forum, exactly. Depends on that. No, every forum will have their templates, and they're all trying to eliminate rather than select. Correct. That is the reason you have this problem. Yeah.
No, I totally get what you're saying. Because in a lot of places, even for us and for many of us, I think that's what it is. And the next question is that what is the guarantee that my idea will not be taken away or stolen by the investor?
See, it's the business they're in. It's not really the business of venture capital venture capital is not in the business of building businesses. It's in the business of catalyzing people who are building businesses. So our job is catalysis, is to actually be supportive and be the investor in those businesses. It's not, a VC is not a business builder. Venture capital is a business in itself. So, and if we did that to one entrepreneur, then why would any other entrepreneur come to us? The word will spread. So there is no upside in doing that for any VC. So no VC will ever do that, regardless of whether they sign an NDA or not. The reason a lot of venture capital firms don't sign non-disclosure agreements is because we are seeing so many business proposals in adjacent areas that there is really no way for us to sign an NDA and be true to that. Because at any given point of time, there will be a flood of applications of startups which are doing stuff in similar areas. So you will see a lot of very similar things. So expecting NDA signatures hence most VC firms don't sign NDAs, but you can be rest assured that no VC is going to try and steal your idea, because then they will never get, good quality entrepreneurs coming to them. So even if you got one good idea, you have killed your business forever by trying to steal it, steal from some entrepreneur. So it barely ever happens as far as I know.
Yeah. So one more question is, it would be great if you can explain something about one-page investor pitch and how effective it is.
I mean, one page, I don't know. I mean, see, again, what can you convey in a page? You can only convey your high level, what your thought process is about what is the problem you're solving, and what is your solution as far as you see it. If you have clarity of thought and a very simple way to convey that clarity of thought, I think, a couple of 2-3 sentences is all it takes to put your story down. Remaining part is just the details of how you're going to do it, the technology behind it, the architecture, the business model, the operations, the financial model. But your clarity of thought on what it is that you want to do and how you're going to do it, you should be able to put together in a single page. I mean, that much clarity you should have when you're getting in. If you are not able to put it down in one page, then there is a problem. You need to understand why you are not able to convey your idea in a simple way. So, so in my mind, I think it's doable to do it in one page as long as you're able to have a clear view of what your problem is and what your solution is. Then you can put it in a single page and convey it.
So I think a couple of them who have written, sir, I have a service-based idea. I want to go after it after my BTech, but my parents want me to do it after my MBA. And similar question, when do you suggest we do a startup as soon as we are out of college, or maybe after some experience? What do investors prefer, and what is their personal?
It's neither here nor there. I mean, you can have either way. I mean, we've had success. We've had very good success with straight out of college entrepreneurs. In fact, one of the entrepreneur companies that we have just backed was started by, it came out of IIT Madras, and the entrepreneur approached us in his first year summer. He approached us in his first year summer. Wow. We tracked him and saw what he was doing over the next 2 summers. And by the final year, before he entered final year, he had a check from us. And he finished final year, and we got a Series A round with a $4 million round already done.
Wow.
Now, so here is a case where we loved the guy's energy, loved his idea, loved the enthusiasm he had, and the ability for him to pull a team together. He's managing a team of 80 people. He's 22 years old. Wow. I mean, and so it was amazing to see his energy. But so it's not that you cannot build a business straight out of college. You can. If you think some job experience in life will help you, definitely do it. It's a question. There is no right or wrong answer to this. I mean, you could be successful at either point. In my mind, business school actually doesn't help you in becoming an entrepreneur, because it makes you far more risk averse. Because you are constantly analyzing where things will go wrong when you get an MBA. So then you are constantly thinking about how to mitigate that risk, and you're not willing to take the risk. So people are more risk-taking in my mind pre-MBA than post-MBA.
I understand. So, and so one more question says, like, what if for some startups like an agri-tech startup which involves a lot of groundwork, like convincing farmers how to face difficulties, etc., Do you back such ideas, or what do you think? How to go about such kind of ideas?
Yeah, so it depends on the kind of investors you're going for. If you go for commercial venture capital, you'll have to provide a investment exit of almost 5x the money they put in over the course of 5 years. So typically for companies where you need to get a valuation uplift of 5x or more, it tends to be companies that are technology based, because scaling happens only that way. I mean, without technology, it's very difficult to scale such businesses. Hence, when you're talking about more service led businesses or more capital intensive businesses or more labor intensive businesses, it typically does not attract venture capital. Does not mean that there is no other form of funding. There are many other forms of funding available for different ideas like that. So whatever you want to pursue, you need to find financing options that are aligned with the kind of business you want to build. So service businesses, education businesses, healthcare businesses, agri businesses, each have a different type of investor. So you need to identify investors in your ecosystem for whom such investments make sense, and then you try and target them. So it's not that you can't raise money because you are doing an agri business. You can. I mean, it's maybe harder. Maybe there are lesser investors compared to technology VCs, but definitely possible to get some form of funding.
Okay, a little more advanced question. I don't know
Yeah.
why someone's thought of this. How to solve business conflicts between the founding members and how to choose the right opinions from them as business ideas.
I mean, this is actually not, I mean, founding member conflict is one of the big reasons why businesses fail. One of the biggest reasons where, if I look back at 15 years of venture capital, I mean, it is such a big part of why so many businesses where there was a product market fit, where everything was there, it failed because finally the founders just couldn't get along and they went their own ways and the businesses collapsed. See, because there is a DNA that the company has, and that DNA comes from the founders. There's a culture that the founders build. So when the founders split up, it's a nightmare. I mean, it's very hard for a young startup to recover when founders leave. Very few startups succeed in doing that. So, I mean, yeah. So there is, I mean, it's human emotions end of the day. There is no technical solution for how you will solve founder conflict. I mean, you've got to work at it. You've got to work at it without letting the rest of the company know how tough it is. Because if the rest of the staff knows that the founders are fighting, that is the end. I mean, people will leave right away. I mean, people won't even stay. So it's not easy. I mean, founder conflict, there is no good way to solve it. It's a real problem, and you've got to work at it, and figure out a way to solve it, on your own.
I think the very general another question that what would be the target market during pandemics? But I don't know.
No, in this time, I mean, if you look at where a lot of investments happening, two very clear areas. One is health tech, one is edu tech. And health tech, not just because of COVID. The point is, what COVID is showing you is that people's interest and awareness to not get sick. I'm not talking about curing diseases once you have it. That is definitely important anyway. How do you not get sick in the first place? And then the second thing is, how do you stay at peak health? How do you stay really healthy? I mean, peak health. I mean, there is a movement now globally where people are saying it's not about treating when somebody is sick, or not even about not getting sick. It's about how do you stay extremely healthy. So, you have a lot of effort, a lot of startups that are trying to do everything from plant nutrition to immune boosting to whatever. I mean, so many things happening on the healthcare front that is very interesting, which is way beyond what was just pharmacology or drug development or EHR, electronic health records and data analytics and all, which were all there anyway. But there is a lot more to health and preventive health and all of that, which is becoming very big. The other is education and edutech. So what's happening is, I mean, especially the rural urban divide, or the lower medium income divide in terms of an urban divide in terms of education is becoming even worse in a COVID time, because the kids in many of those families don't have the ability to be able to use technology to get classes online, etc. So the gap, which was already big between urban and rural, is just going to get even worse. So there is a lot of room to innovate on technology, on edutech, to do something to solve that problem. Then there is a lot of opportunity on reskilling and upskilling employees in the millions who have been let go, or people who are afraid of getting let go from companies. So everyone wants to upskill and reskill. So there's a lot of opportunity coming up in edutech there. Then areas like enterprise AI, productivity improvement, efficiency AI, machine learning, lot of opportunity, because if a pandemic like this happens again, it is very likely another pandemic can come, then how can you use, if you have to go, everybody has to go off the grid again, how do you ensure that the businesses stay productive? That means a lot of AI and ML is going to be used for enterprises to and where human intervention will be reduced, or rather the management will want to reduce human intervention to ensure that the businesses continue. So a lot more AI ML stuff will happen, a lot of industrial automation, a lot more robotics, a whole lot more investments in advanced 3D printing. Now you may have supply chain disruptions, people wanting to move supply chains outside China, out of China. And COVID was already causing a lot of animosity with China. Now you have the animosity today between India and China. So now, assuming you want to do all this, and a lot of countries want to move stuff out of a country like China, and which has dominated supply chains, then what will happen if you want to do nearshoring of things? When you have to do nearshoring, then you need a lot of new technologies and new ways to be able to do supply chain. So manage the supply chain. So there will be a lot of innovation, for example, in the innovative new supply chain space. So robotics, AI, supply chain, health tech, edutech are all areas in my mind where there is a lot more new opportunity coming because of COVID. Where the opportunities will reduce in the near term will be things like discretionary consumer spending, shared mobility, stuff like that, because people will still be scared for some time to get into a car, a shared cab and stuff like that. So a bunch of investments in those areas may decrease, and a whole bunch of new investments will happen, especially around health tech and AI and edutech and stuff like that.
Okay. I think Sumuk had shortlisted a few questions. So maybe 4-5 more, and then
Yes, sir. So we have a question which says that my idea is based on social innovation with no business model. And so what do you think is the right way to get the business model or build a business model around this kind of startup?
I mean, how is it a business if it doesn't have a business model? I mean, it has to have a business model, right? I mean, there has to be a way the business should be able to, to be able to generate at least enough to be able to keep the show going. Otherwise, it's more of an NGO activity that you're talking about, or a not-for-profit activity, which you can only keep going, running it through philanthropic capital.
Maybe something of maybe something like a social venture. So few of them also are thinking, how do we run a maybe social venture, which may not be for profit, but maybe it is evaluated by the good it does to the society. Would you get some investments?
Which is the impact investment space. So now, see, in impact investing, if you're coming to commercial money, to raise commercial money, you go to the impact investor world. So the only difference between the impact investment world and the commercial investment world is typically the impact investors will take a lower rate of return. It's not that they don't want a return. They will take a lower rate of return, and the compensation. So assuming a venture capital fund has an expectation of 25% per year return, impact investor may take a 10% or 12% per year. But that remaining bit, is the impact, the social impact that you're creating. So you have to be able to quantify the impact, whether it is, you're offering education to the underserved, or if it is, healthcare to the underrepresented population, whatever it is. So the point is that impact is what will be the difference between that 10-12% return that is expected and what would be typically expected in a commercial investor, from a commercial investor. Now, but if you are not able to even make that 5-10% or 12, return, at least the business needs to be able to do what it needs to do to recover the costs of operations. So it needs to at least sustain operations. So in terms of who will fund something like this, it will depend from anywhere from philanthropic organizations to charity-driven organizations to, grant-making organizations to impact venture capital funds. But impact funds will require a certain return. So there has to be a business model. So the business model may not give the high returns, but it will still need to give a return. So you cannot avoid having to give a return typically in a social venture as well. Because if the grant making organization feels that once the grant runs out, if you are not able to sustain operations, then that the purpose of the business is lost. You can't keep it going. It will not survive. So there has to be a business model, a way to monetize through which you are able to keep the operations going at least. So that's the effort that you'll have to put in to identify what that business model is. But there are enough business models out there even for social ventures. If you look at any of the social ventures literature, especially do look at things that Omidyar or Gates Foundation, etc. put out. They've put out enough and more reports out there for different social ventures that they have backed, which will offer a return, but with lower return compared to commercial venture capital.
Yeah, it's like even at our innovation center at IMACX, we are looking at some civic tech to be an incubator for civic tech ventures.
Yes, yeah.
And you've worked with us.
Yes, I've come for the civic tech stuff long back. Yeah.
Professor Ramesh couldn't make it today,
Yes.
but yeah, he was telling me to send his wishes to one, because
Yes.
now we are also working in a lot of this impact space.
Right.
So, like you're saying, absolutely, I would also second the same thought that we are looking that particular investment goes into actually some impact, and it should be measurable. Otherwise, it's right.
It has to be measurable for sure, but it has to also make enough to keep the business going. If it otherwise it's over. No, once the grant money runs out, you're dead. That's the problem. Yeah.
So that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Yogeshwaran? So I think Yogeshwaran had picked up a few questions. So
I have one quick question. Shyam, you had specifically spoken about the co-founding team, at least to have two co-founders, right? What we have seen is a lot of students individually work on an idea, try to take it to market, test out the market, and now they see, okay, there is a potential, they've made some revenues. And now if they want to scale up, they have a team of 4 or 5 people working, but they are not a core founding team or like co-founders. How do they approach the VC funding or like any sort of an angel or seed funding for them to scale their operations?
See, it's okay. That's what happens in most cases. It is started by one person. It's not really 2 or 3 people really starting something. Generally it is one person. So what happens is in that case is you will find a CTO equivalent, a chief technical officer, or somebody who you bring in early on in the early part of your journey, who may not have co-founded it with you, but who is senior enough and who will take on the responsibility for that entire piece. Whether it is technology development, whether it is sales, so the thing is, in some ways they are late joining co-founders. They are late joiners in that sense. So, but you can find such people. What I'm trying to say is, don't piece together a co-founding team for the sake of funding. A co-founder is really someone with whom you typically would tend to come together and build a business. But I realize that many businesses don't start that way. But even if it doesn't start that way, it's okay. Even when you're pitching to the investors, you say that, well, this was the primary founder. He started with a business. But along the way, these are the people he brought in, senior people who have independent responsibility to be able to run their part of the business, whether it is developing the technology or whatever else it may be. So they are in some sense late joining co-founders, but that's a normal model. You see that pretty much in so many businesses these days.
Perfect, Shyam. Shyam, as a follow-up to that particular question, say for example, a founder has started the business, and then like, for example, you brought out the topic of having a technology, like a CTO coming in, right? For the initial part, is it okay if those co-founding teams who are coming in, they work part-time to build the business? Would that work?
It can. Again, there is no cut or dry answer, but we've seen that as well. Because especially if you're trying to get somebody, if you're coming straight out of college and all that, it's different. If you're then trying to hire a guy who has a family and has other responsibilities, that person's not going to leave his job and come if there is no funding available for the company. So we have seen that. But I can tell you that that the value and the credibility of an entrepreneur, especially a young entrepreneur, is if he can convince people who have real paying jobs to leave it and then join you to build a business without even funding coming in. That is the sign of a really a credible entrepreneur who's able to attract talent. Attracting talent when you have funding is easy. You have money to throw around. Then you are getting people because they'll come for the money. But attracting talent when there is no funding, that means you are selling that person on the idea and bringing them in. That is much harder. So if as a VC, we look for people who have convinced high quality people to join that person on a journey, even when there was no funding. That is the sign of a true entrepreneur who's actually, who's somebody worth backing. Because you give somebody 10 million and then ask him to hire people, he'll anyway hire. There is no risk to the person joining. He's getting a salary. Yeah, there is a risk that the startup may not take off too long, but at least for a couple of years, he has a salary. But when there is no funding, if he has to bring in 15, 20 people and there is no revenue, convincing people to come in on a journey at that stage is much harder. That is the sign of a true entrepreneur. So those are the kind of people that we would love to back,
Totally, Shyam. Thanks a lot for sharing that. I think that is going to add a lot of value to the students who are here to kickstart their initial journey for sure.
Yeah.
And two more things. For example, so a lot of students have this, fancy that what is the amount? So, there is something like a seed investment or pre-seed or Series A. There are a lot of fancy terms out in the industry for a lot of them. And, so everyone talks about, hey, I'm working on my Series A without looking at what something like a seed investment means. So what is the amount? Typical. So a lot of people come to us with this question. Sir, I'm here. You are the incubator. Next stage after you is Series A. Sir, how much do I get? So, what's your... So it's like couple of lakhs, and then you look at a lot of figures, right? Because now a lot of things are in million or something like $100,000 or $500,000 or something like that. So what's your take on these kind of things?
Eventually, it depends on what the idea is and what is necessary for that idea to take off. So it depends on what funding is needed for the business. So if you look at if you have to somehow still break it down and give a number, hold on, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you have to break it down and give a number, broadly, typically, checks like $100,000, $200,000 is considered seed investment. Once you go beyond the couple of $100,000, you go closer to $1 million. You go there, that is, 6-7 crores. You're getting closer there. That's more you would call a pre-series A. And then broadly in technology investing, between $1 and $5 million is typically what you would call a series A. 1 and 5, and then between 5 and 15 million is what you would call a series B. And then beyond that, it would go 15 to 30 million or so, 40 million would be series C. So broadly, this is how you would split it. 100 to 200,000 would be seed. It's not always the same, but you get a sense of what it is.
So for example, some places in India like us and others, you get smaller grants of 10 lakhs and 10 lakh to about maybe 30 lakh for, what is that bucketed as in your...
You can call it seed investing. These are all seed. We also do 30 lakh checks from the incubator. So that's a seed investment, right? Or an angel. You can call it seed or angel. It's all the same.
Because a lot of people come to us and they say, hey, what, you also have an incubator and, you're looking at 4 to 7 lakhs, but a lot of people are looking at many more lakhs.
Of course, I agree. Most incubators will not be able to do anything more than that,
Correct. So, yeah. I think maybe we will do the last one.
Yes, we have a question from Simon, which says, since we're not familiar with the business and financial aspects, corresponding to your question saying that, okay, there can be multiple technology founders. So his question is, when we hire a business person, how can we trust him to do things that we don't know about? And yeah, that's the question.
You have to be able to trust. If you're bringing in a co-founder, it has to be built on some basis of trust. You need to have known this person or understand why this person wants to join you. Try and figure out what motivates him to be a part of your team, him or her to be a part of your team. And I mean, so there is when you're bringing in any external person early on, a senior person, you need to spend a lot more time with that person to understand really what motivates them and why they want to do this and what value will they bring into this company. Because, those initial few people are the people who will set the culture of the company. They are the ones who will decide and dictate how the rest of the team gets built out, the culture of the team and the culture of the organization is set by the senior people. So be very careful about bringing in any new person, especially in the early days. Your initial hires or your initial teammates that you're bringing together on this should be the most vetted of anything. So even if it takes you months to bring on board one person, it's okay. The senior people, that core set of 5-10 people that you have initially that is the bedrock on which the business will get built. So it is super critical that you do as much vetting as possible before you bring anybody in. So you need to really spend time with them to understand what motivates them, what is the reason they want to do this, especially if they are from a different phase of life. If they are much more senior to you from a established business, why are they leaving that to join you and do a young startup? What is the key rationale and motivation for this person? You need to understand that how they work. Will that work, that style of working, will that work with you? Does it mesh with the culture that you have in mind? Spend a lot of time with any new hire in the early days, because down the road, it will be more functional hires that you do. But that core initial team of 5-10 people that you bring in some ways, they may have some functional expertise, but in reality, they will do everything that the business needs. So they will do anything from marketing, sales, technology, whatever. I mean, because the initial people don't really have a job description. They have to do everything it takes to make the business succeed. So that core set of people is very critical when you hire. So you need to ensure that they are motivated by the right things when you're joining, because you will definitely not have enough money to pay them. So money won't be the motivating factor for them. It has to be something beyond that.
Perfect.
Great. On that note, could I ask, thank you so much, Shyam.
Sure.
Karthik, just one quick question.
Yes. Okay. Can I ask Yogeshwaran to also do the question and propose the vote of thanks?
Sure, Karthik. So one of the major questions or major doubts in most of the young founders' mind is about equity split among the founding team. How should someone go about that?
Ideally, I mean, if you're all founders, it should be equally split. I mean, there isn't, if you are starting as co-founders, just split it equally. Then there is no, confusion or, ill will in the beginning. But if one person has put in more work in the beginning and you feel that person deserves more, figure that out early on, and ensure that there is complete and clear documentation of this early on. Don't make this verbal, put it down on a piece of paper, have it written down and countersigned, so that there is a documentation of what has been agreed upon. Because I have seen where people have stayed together for a few years, come together. Now, finally, an investment round happens, and for the first time, they have to actually create a cap table and then the capital table, and then they are all suddenly confused about who is supposed to have what stake, because they found that a very difficult conversation and was not willing to have that conversation early on. So, ideally, just if you're starting together, just keep it an equal split. It's the easiest. But if there is a reason for one person to have more than the other, then so be it. But decide that ahead of time and put it down on paper. Don't leave it till the end, because that can bring about a collapse of the whole thing.
Got it, Shyam. Shyam, just a quick add-on to that. So initially, most of the students at least are not very fond of getting a legal agreement and all that done. Yeah. Just a simple paper contract.
Paper contract will do. Just do it, Perfect. Put it, sign it, and keep it. So that it is not questioned later. That you have something in writing from the beginning.
Got it. Totally, Shyam.
That's it. That's the easiest way to do this. Yeah.
Perfect, Shyam. Thanks a lot for doing that. With that, we've come to the end of today's session. Shyam, on behalf of IIIT Bangalore and IMACX Incubation Studio and Founders Card, I would like to propose the vote of thanks to you for being here, taking your time out on a weekday and then on a work day especially, and coming in, engaging with the young minds and helping them shape their startup or business idea to take shape. That's primarily why we are all here. Thanks a lot for being here with us, Shyam.